You're about to listen to a new episode of Audio Signals. Get ready to take a journey into the known, the unknown, and everything in between. Recorded at no specific point in time nor space, ITSP Magazine's co-founders Marco Ciappelli and Sean Martin follow their passion and curiosity as they venture away from the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society to discover new stories worth being told. Knowledge is power, now more than ever.
Blue Lava is the first business platform for CISOs to manage their security program. Blue Lava guides security leaders to effectively measure, optimize, and communicate their security program with confidence and ease in one platform. Learn more at bluelava.net.
Marco.
Sean.
I'm tired of learning.
Go play a video game or something. Or go play soccer. That would be like what I would do if I was tired of learning when I was a kid. I would just go outside, play soccer, get on a bike, hurt myself, get up, hurt myself again, get up. Yeah. That's how I went all day long.
I don't know, Rafa, Carey, do you guys play soccer?
I grew up playing soccer. Morning, Sean. Morning, Marco. I grew up playing soccer, and it's still one of my favorite games. I mean, it's so easy, isn't it? Just take a ball and you find an open field and just kick it around, and it's amazing.
Oh, it's easy to play it. It's easy to be good at it. We could have a debate about that.
Well, easy to play. I'm good at it. I'm not sure.
Easy to play.
But it is very democratic. It's a very democratic sport. You just need a ball. I love that.
You just need a ball. I mean, not even a ball. Sometimes we play soccer with bunched up paper.
Yeah, or a rolled jacket, or I don't know, a t-shirt, whatever.
Sock.
Yeah. Rafael, did you play soccer?
Oh yeah. Well, and that's the thing is that I mean it's sometimes called the world sport, and it's probably because it's the most elemental. If you have if you have your foot or other body part and a round object, you can take your knee, you can take your foot, and you can kick or knock around a ball or something vaguely resembling a ball. So yeah. I mean,
you can make some money, some serious money from that.
Exactly.
The irony. That's the irony, right? I mean, it's such a cheap sport and it becomes such a big business. Think about that. That's probably that. Money's in the number, probably, huh?
It is. And FIFA is one of the largest. I mean, even if you move it away from the actual physical space, you look at FIFA, one of the biggest franchises in video games. That's been around for years and years and years.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. How about you, Sean? Did you play soccer or surfing as a LA boy?
Surfing.
Growing up?
No soccer for me.
Oh, well.
No football. No, I never really got into it. I tried a few different sports, but ended up, backpacking, diving, surfing, those kind of things, which aren't team sports necessarily, but things I enjoy doing. So. Sailing.
That's good.
Also a sport, but again, not team racing. Sailing was a team sport. Pretty competitive.
That's not a cheap one. I'm thinking.
Need more than a ball and a couple feet for that one.
Maybe skateboarding. I can see that. You can even make it your own, right? Your own skateboard to surf. It's not too expensive, but yeah. And how about learning? Do you learn something when you play?
Yeah. Well, so I think that's one of the interesting things about games, and not just video games, but really any type of game it involves learning. If you think about it, if you're doing play, it can be a sport, it can be an activity, it can be something structured, but there's something elemental in play, and I think a lot of us in game development we respond to that because there's this very kind of basic idea that from the beginning, we play in order to learn. We socialize, we mimic, we we copy things that other people do. We take on personas, we role play, um, but there's always this notion that from the moment that we can kind of function as babies and move around, we play because it's a way to practice things. It's a way to try things out, and whether it's motor skills to do the basics of a sport, which could be swimming, it could be running, could be playing soccer, or it could be sitting down and playing with someone else, but you learn things through it. So I mean, it's not it's there in structured education, but like it's just there in every bit of learning that we do, where we go, yes, you can learn in a more structured way, but oftentimes the best way to start is just to play. Um,
And I agree, Raf. And I think with games, and not just the physical part of it. If you look at virtual games, one of the things I've learned was that what it does, if you look at the traditional method of learning, the structured method, it's sort of there's a very specific level. Everybody's expected to learn at the same pace, the same level, and there's some sort of you've got the whole bell curve situation. But I think that the whole video game stuff, besides the motor skills and the focus and stuff, if you look at the educational part of it, the learning happens at your own pace and without any peer pressure. And then you can find your groups, or you can find your virtual groups, and you can actually learn at your own pace. And I think that's a very powerful sort of learning mechanism, because when you're in a structured situation where there's few people who are at the top of the class, and then there's few people at the bottom, and then there's a majority of people in the middle, there's always that push and pull, compete, and there's all of that some sort of stigma attached if you are the staggler in the class. And I think with video games and with virtual learning, that goes away. And I think if you look at virtual, even there's a bit of a stigma attached to games, but I know that there are medical schools now who are teaching hand-eye coordination using video games. I know the government and military and the police have started using that. I know race car drivers and actually drivers in certain countries are required to play a driving video game just to get a better understanding of situational awareness and hand-eye coordination. And the best part is the cost. It's a low-cost way of developing your skills and low risk versus developing hand-eye coordination in the real world, where the cost can almost always be more than you want to pay.
Yeah, so many points there. I mean, just what are we learning? Is it math? Is it language? Is it history? Or are we trying to figure out how to function in an environment? And can we place ourselves in that environment so we have some context and perhaps even get some feeling back from our interaction with that environment? And I'm just thinking back to just gaming in general, where the whole point is how fast can you press a button, or can you memorize the path? I'm thinking Pac-Man here, right? Or Miss Pac-Man. You have to memorize the path, and how fast can you do that same path over and over and over to get to the next level? So I'm just wondering if there's, comparing it to like a structured education where you're going to learn this, to your point, Carey, everybody's going to learn this about the same pace. And what are you learning? Or are you just memorizing something? And do you get the context of that situation you're learning about? I guess the big question I always have is, how do you apply what you quote unquote learn to real life, right? And I think that's where games have a huge role in, again, kind of presenting to you perhaps a world, if it's history, a world where that particular event took place. So you can actually visualize it better and perhaps even feel it better in a different way. And then maybe even connect it to your current world, your current situation. So I don't know, Carey or Raf, how do games are And I guess the other question is, how do we try to hide the learning in the game, or are we explicit with you're about to learn, you're now have fun doing it, or what's
Well, I think
the
the best
driver?
part, there were two things. I mean, what best part about games is that you don't have to hide or be explicit. I mean, they're just there. I mean, it's just part of the game, and I think it forces you to learn how to strategize. It forces you. I mean, I was playing a game. I'm trying to learn a couple of languages, and I was playing this game, and then the fact that it's gamified, the whole thing, it subconsciously you are learning while having fun. And I think that's the beauty of learning by video games. That when you're in a structured situation, it's a very it's a very dry and clinical way of learning. It's like you said, Marco, like, are you really memorizing stuff? Are you really or learning how to think? But I think in games, inherently, the way the games are designed, you are learning how to think. And I think that's so important, right? I mean, so any skill, when you learn how to think about how to apply that skill, that those lessons stay with you for life versus, hey, read these 5 chapters because that's what they're going to test you on, and that's it. And you forget all of that after the test. The other thing you mentioned was I can actually go and relive World War II through games and actually truly get a historical perspective. And I can go relive the moon landing. And then, even though I was not born then, but that allows you to virtually insert yourself and sort of get a feeling of what it was like to be present and learn a bit more about that and have a sort of a better perspective about all of that. And I think that you can't get from reading the book or even in a classroom, and that you have to be virtually inserted in an environment, interact with an environment for you to be able to get that, I think.
Yeah, and that I think is kind of the point, is that you can learn different things in different mediums. A book is really good for very slowly and carefully building context through words on a page. A book is good for, let's say presenting. You can have a textbook that is presenting equations and algorithms. It's presenting a 2D image there that shows you a bunch of context on that image. But if you have a game, it's games, whether it's a video game or it's a game in real life. Games are spatial. There's movement. You are immersed in the middle of them, and they're much better for practicing, for doing and being. And so a game can, because of that, be much better at, because it can do that immersion, it can throw you into something and potentially build empathy, because it can build context. It can say, in the same way, frankly, that that a film can, that a teacher in a classroom can be like, well, I can tell you about World War II, or I can put this movie on and have you watch 30 minutes of this documentary and have you understand it, or we can, have you pull out your iPads and all of you go into it, or in the future, eventually, it's, oh, everyone here put on a headset and then look around and we're going to walk you through it together. But games with that 3D component, that spatial awareness can give you the sense of doing and being and feeling. And if you think about it, that can come through the interface of a computer, but it really, it starts with things like soccer, that you go like, well, I can sit down and explain to you the movements that you're going to do in soccer. I can write them down and show you what those look like and give you images of soccer, but it's going to be a lot more effective if I throw you a ball and you kick it.
Well, I think that's a great point you made there, Raf, about testing outcomes in a risk-free, cheap manner. I mean, that's one thing games allow you to do. I mean, if you take it soccer, I mean, if a coach wants to practice traditional way, like they draw certain moves on a board and they go and practice. But now you can actually test the outcome, and you can sort of simulate your opposing team, and you can test outcomes of your strategy. And this could be for just about anything. And that's one of the things that games allow you to do, that learning through games, that it's a low cost, low risk way of testing your theory or hypothesis, and then basically saying, yep, this can now be applied to real life with a fair degree of certainty because you've tested all the scenarios. So I think definitely big powerful feature of games.
All right. So my question here is, I mean, totally agree. We've always been using gaming. I mean, even in, I don't know, kindergarten, parents, I mean, you play with kids to teach them how to do things. And they know that. I mean, maybe at the beginning they get tricked and it's like, oh, it's a game. Cool. And then it's like, okay, but I'm also learning something. There are books that you color. I mean, you can understand that. But now I'm thinking in the future, as we're moving in, virtual reality and everything. I mean, we know all the application of training, simulation, even phobias that you can cure or at least help by using simulators and stuff. And I'm wondering, are there already any reports and numbers and research on the fact that is it as effective, like compare with actually doing something with the game component versus being completely virtual instead of hands-on? I mean, virtual hands-on. I'm just curious if we're going to achieve the same result. Do you guys know anything about it?
I know that there are a couple of things. I know for police training, and they were using a couple of video games to basically fine tune or hone up the reaction time to react, sort of to any situation, and they thought it was pretty helpful. And I know there's a company out of UK who's created a surgical simulator that allows doctors to basically train residents really quickly in like they can simulate sort of a ruptured artery while you're in a surgical procedure to basically create that whole sort of a critical situation and then develop awareness around how to deal with that without, again, actually doing, because it's hard to do this in a cadaver. I mean, so this allows them to actually simulate real life situations and test outcomes. So there is definitely improvement. It has cut short the cost and the training time for doctors and even for the police people to basically learn these things. So definitely introduce more efficiency in the whole educational system, if I may. But
I was wondering more about kids, because I mean, maybe an adult, just to pinpoint the conversation, maybe an adult is more conscious, like, okay, I'm doing this. I know it's a simulation and I'm learning a new skill.
Well,
is it?
I don't know how the
training and learning. I don't know.
So I know my nephew's school. They're doing something similar. I mean, they've got these sort of I think some sort of reward system where they get they give them, I mean, of course, they give them Xbox or PlayStation cards, but then you've got to get to that, you're solving a bunch of physics and math problems. So it forces them to sort of go through that, and so they're using this more of an incentive situation. And they've introduced a few physics games where they're actually teaching them about moving objects from one place to the other, and then seeing who's most energy efficient in moving stuff. So they're teaching these concepts in a less, in a more interactive manner, without the whole, hey, this is a formula. If you use this is why it's efficient. So definitely, I think, given our exposure to so much different stimuli, I think that seems to be that's something people are adopting. I think there's a lot of learning going on in school through games. I think also teamwork is something that I think a lot of schools are teaching teamwork and collaboration through games.
No, Raf, are there any concepts that Carey's mentioning, kind of moving things around, right, which does it more energy efficiently? It just makes me wonder, are there concepts or learnings that we can do through games that maybe isn't possible in the real world because we don't have access to certain things? I'm just thinking, well, how much does a bottle of milk weigh compared to a rock or so? I don't know, right? So are there other things we can actually explore and learn through games that we wouldn't otherwise?
Yeah. And I think, so like using that example, you can do physics simulation. You can teach You can't necessarily teach the mathematical formulas, but you can show them in practice. Because games are experiential. You go through the experience, and you can go through it and replay it, and do different variations to test things out. You can also sometimes understand context because you can illustrate it. There was a group recently over in the UK that wanted to get into illustration of climate change, and so they built out a little simulation in Minecraft that showed this particular town and what would happen if there was flooding from torrential rains. And so, like, the notion of, like, this is how the town is going to change. Um, Showing a simulation. Yeah, it's in Minecraft, and Minecraft is cartoony, but sometimes, like, that's the equivalent of like throwing on a cartoon that's illustrating things, but then the kids are in the middle of that. And so the fact that they can look around and they can explore at their own pace, and they don't have to just watch a passive image, but they can walk through it and go, like, oh, this is a representation of my house, and this is what happens when it looks like my town is flooded. So yeah, and you can go from that from a game on a flat screen to putting on a VR headset. The folks at the Stanford Virtual Human Interaction Lab, they would do simulations, which would be like, this is what it feels like to have fear of heights, and then on the other side, medical groups can use that trauma of, like, snakes or spiders or fear of heights or other things to expose people to that, and then kind of pull them back from it. So you can run a simulation as many times as you want. You can change it around. You can try to work to lessen someone's trauma, and you can expose them to a thing to either build empathy for one situation or to desensitize and go, like, oh, spiders may not be a thing that you like, but you don't have to be terrified. You don't have to be frozen. You can get through it. Or, this is what it's going to feel like to be on the side of a cliff. And yes, there's a long fall. We're exposing you to that virtually, but it's better to be able to get through it and not to freeze or fall over. So yeah, putting you into a situation, controlling that, and then trying to get to a result is definitely useful in video games or in virtual reality.
And I think you've mentioned a very classic game, Minecraft, and I think that's a great game where the learning happens without you knowing. I mean, kids are learning about physics and architectural concepts. They're learning about design stuff. They're literally learning fairly complex science, technical sort of knowledge without actually going through the books. I mean, if you look at young kids building stuff in Minecraft, and they're exploring physics concepts because they just want to build better fortresses and better stuff, and they understand the whole strategy. And so that stuff, only that bit which comes from gaming, if it's really hard to sort of bring it out of a virtual world and do the same thing in physical. I mean, there's nothing I can think of in the physical world that replicates that. With this, allows you to create your design and leave it, and then others come and sort of, in a way, they either break it or you then break it. So you're learning through sort of peer reinforcement. And I think that's fantastic. So I mean, there you have it. That's a classic example of learning complex technical skills, or at least knowledge, without really learning through books. So by the time these kids go on, and if they do decide to take on some math and physics classes later on in life, some of the concepts are going to become so clear to them, they'll understand. So learning itself might be easier for them because they've already been exposed to doing some of these things, which we didn't have as a kid.
So I'm gonna be the old man, like, oh, back in my days things were so much better. or the devil's advocate. So I could totally see the application for that. Like, you could actually see the effect of mathematics, formula, physics, and you can build a bridge and say, well, what the position of where it's supporting, I mean, real, the weight of whatever is going over the car, the train, and then there is the other side, which is there are other things where I think that if you show, instead of letting the kids imagine and creating his own world in his own head, like you do when you read or you listen to the radio. I like to say, I like to watch the radio because I can visualize the description that they give me, right? Or if I listen to an audiobook, I like to create that world. And if you watch a movie, for example, that world is created for you. I mean, we talk about, it was a dark and stormy night in 2 episodes ago, and how do you represent that versus how you represent it in your head. So I'm kind of playing the both thing. Like, I can see that for certain things, the visual gaming, it's important. You can do a lot more. On the other, the imagination and maybe the actual physical hands-on in, I don't know, creating a lever instead with your hands instead of building it. Of course, you can't simulate, again, a rocket that goes to the moon. So maybe we need both. I guess that's my point.
Well, you can actually simulate rockets that go to the moon. I think NASA does that all the time. It's going to be rather expensive for them to...
Yeah, but not a kid. I mean, no, you're right. I can fire up.
Yeah. I think you can teach concepts of that. You're absolutely right. I mean, you can teach concepts of that to kids. And okay, if you want to send this object to the moon, you'll have to put this much sort of rocket fuel in it, and you can only have... So you can teach the basic concept. But to your point, Marco, I think the movies have a very defined, if you look at it, that's why they say books are always better, because it's your individual perspective that colors your imagination and then lets you live that. But movies movies, I look at it as it's like learning in a classroom. It's like standard stuff. Everybody gets to see the same stuff and then make what you want of it. So some people enjoy it, some people don't really care much for it. But if you now move that and add interaction and add gaming to it, it's sort of a bit of a hybrid, right? You still have the visual experience, but because you're interacting with it, you can add your own perspective and sort of create your own reality to an extent, which is never going to be as imaginative as the book, because that's like a clean thing. But it's also not going to be fixed as the movie. So it's sort of a bit of a good in-between hybrid in my mind, I think. Raf?
Right. Well, so part of what you're getting at there is that you can read a book and then you can imagine, and when you're imagining, you're creating. Now, you may be just creating in your own head, and you may not be, going off into other tools. You could go from there and go, well, I imagined it. Now let me see if I can paint it, or can I draw it? There's a creative aspect to imagining, where you get your own sense of it, and then you go like, oh, this isn't, I'm watching the book or the film adaptation of a book, and this isn't how I imagined it. How did you imagine it? You can go and draw that, or write it yourself, or you can paint images of the scenes that you had in your head. But this is actually, this is kind of an interesting component of parallel to play is creation. You can be creative, and in being creative, it's not quite play, but it's a very close complement, because if you think about it, you can sit down and you can paint a scene, you can write a book, you can draw with pen or pencil or crayons, you can but you can also sit down on a computer and you can go, okay, let me see if I can sketch that out in Photoshop or Illustrator or another tool like that. And that, like, one of the things that we sometimes forget is that in making video games, just like in making film or TV or animation, someone sat down and started with a script and then said, okay, let me see if I can visualize that and make it into a world for somebody else. That in order for there to be that play, there has to be someone who does some amount of work and creativity to manufacture a thing and then put it in front of you and say, okay, now play in this space. So I wanted to throw that in because it can be considered work, but I often consider creative endeavors, creation, to be a little bit different from formal work, and also kind of different from formal play, where you can go, okay, I'm going to practice, and now I'm going to play this sonata that I've learned. I've got a guitar, and I'm going to play the song. But you play and you perform, but prior to doing that, you might have done 10,000 hours of just, can I get the basic chords? So creation is an important step, because sometimes you need it in order to create the spaces for other people to play.
And I'm kind of going back to the soccer thing, but using your guitar example, Rafael, where I can see a game where, well, how exactly do you need to hold your fingers on the neck, right? Which fingers on which strings? It may feel uncomfortable, but that's the best way. Because why? Because you're going to switch to this other chord, and you need your fingers in that position to quickly switch to the next one. And only through seeing that and seeing somebody else do that might I actually learn that. And I think so having examples is really cool. And I'm gonna switch it now using that, perhaps to a dark side, but games where we are presenting a world that is a bit fantasy, where to your point, Rafael, where we have a script, we say this is the world we want to create, we're pushing the technology to the limits to create that world, and we're stretching the imagination of the creator of that game to create that world. And in there, we might use, I don't know, cars that can drive faster than they really do, or people can swim underwater longer than they really can, or people will get shot and come back to life, even though they probably should have died where they got. Those types of things. Are we in jeopardy or in danger of teaching things that aren't real? And are kids going to learn things that may put them at a disadvantage because they think that's how real life is?
No.
I mean, there's
No?
definitely.
My answer is no.
I think there's definitely some sort of desensitizing that goes on when you show people, especially violence and fantasy worlds, where hey, look, I mean, what was that game? There's a big game. I'm not going to name it here, but where you can basically go and be chased by cop cars and still come on tops. And so it does. There is always that. So to that point, I mean, games alone cannot be the only method which you learn. I think it's got to be games. Games at best sort of are more of an enhancement to the current methods, and I think we've got to be careful where we don't make games the primary teaching method. I think it's a great tool to add to a whole bunch of other tool sets we can use, but I think we're far from where we can just use games to learn stuff. So you're right. There's a dark side.
Well, sorry, I'm sure Rafael wants to get on this, but it's the same thing. That there are books that are made for learning. They're called school books, academic books, and so on. And like I'm reading this, or a biography. I want it to be true. I don't want bullshit in that biography. I want to learn the truth. But then I can take the Lord of the Ring, and all of a sudden there's magic rings. And, I mean, we grew up with that. I mean, even if you look back into the Grimm's brother, I mean, kids get eaten. And
well, not the Disney version of it.
Not the Disney one. No, but the one that were really teaching moral, they were those that are, storytelling through tradition. Like nobody questioned how the huntsman free, the grandma from the stomach of the wolf. That's okay. It's a story. It's still teaching me something, though, right? So I think the distinction is knowing what you're learning, right? So in video games, yeah, I want to be able to fly and defy gravity. But if I'm doing a simulator, I probably want to have the reality check on how this airplane is handling, because I'm actually trying to learn truth.
Yeah. And see, I think that's a really interesting point to learn truth. It's important, especially when you're young, for parents and teachers and other mentors, family members, to expose you to a lot of things, but also to give you a baseline to work from, to be able to say this is truth and this is fiction, and yeah, that there are judgment calls there. If you're not going like, okay, this is how gravity works, and you're instead saying like, this government is good or this government is bad, or the wolf is bad in the story and the pig is good, or is the pig bad and the wolf is good? Everything is it's a transmission of values, in fairy tales and folk tales, but we kind of need some of that. And the biggest thing that we generally need is for young people to be given tools for critical thinking so that they can make up their own minds, so that they can be exposed to a lot and they can learn from it and go, okay, I just sat down and read Lord of the Rings, and I can use it as an allegory for understanding world wars in Europe, and I can see how Sauron can be an allegory for the rise of Nazism. But by contrast, I won't look at it and go, okay, this is how I should understand diversity or representation of women. There's basically no women in it, because if you think about it, a lot of Tolkien is coming out of this guy he was taking a very particular notion at that time of like, this is what I want to present the world as, but he wrote the world that he knew, and that's not always the world that everyone lives in. And so it's important in anything that we're experiencing to sit down and say, how do I interpret it? What do I take from it? What is real? What is fiction? What is important? What things do I let go or gloss over? I can't analyze everything, but I need to take some things out of it. And also, it's also useful to in a game in particular where you're doing, to sometimes be able to test boundaries and go like, oh, like I have a cousin who loves to play The Sims, and sometimes she will set up little dramas, and sometimes she'll do things to torment her Sims, because if you think about it, setting up drama and setting up pathos and suffering for her Sims is kind of like when she's watching a soap opera or she's watching Riverdale, because you don't want everything to just be boring for the Sims. You don't want everything to be boring in a drama. You want tragedy, and then see how people work through tragedy. And so it's not like she's being evil. She's like, well, no, I want to see drama.
But she would probably have done it as they did it in the past, or still do it. If you play with dolls, the doll may get into an accident. The little stove may get on fire, and you as a boy, you have a car crash, right? Or it's not just a smooth Formula One drive with no accident, because that's not reality, right? I mean, that's the thing. I mean, you want to play with that boring balance. Yeah, and it's boring.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You want challenge, you want conflict. Life is about not seeing that everything is smooth and simple, but it's seeing how people work through challenges and find solutions to problems.
Yeah.
If there are no problems, then there's no fun, because then things are too easy.
May I ask a question? It's going to go away from what we're talking now, but I think it's pretty core and correlated to the topic. So we were doing some episode in the past with people that are thinking about education, how we can change the educational system and so forth. And one of the exciting thing that I find probably the most important is when you can use gaming or computer or artificial intelligence, whatever, that and Carey, you said that before, like it's just not you're teaching everybody the same thing. So we're talking about adaptive learning and teaching. So according to your skill, your passion, where you are at, you're not going to be left behind in the class because the program needs to move on, but you're going to be taken and bring it back up. Or if you're way ahead, so I see a huge potential in gaming that could adapt in the teaching process to, and probably they already do it, because I mean, you go at your own pace, right?
They absolutely do that, and I think that's a very important. Look, we all eventually end up learning stuff, but we take different paths to get there. And I think this is the important bit in gaming, where it's teaching you the same concept, but letting you choose your own path to get to that. And I think that's super important. I'm going to go back to the dark side. So I think part of the problem. So you mentioned books and stuff, Marco, and you mentioned how they teach you something. But if you look at it, I mean, the first exposure to books and the stuff comes from an adult in a kid's life, right? But if you look at games have got, kids can access games without adult supervision. I think that's where the sort of a discrepancy comes in, where you can be exposed to certain aspects of life without any adult supervision, and you can then start imagining that is a normal way of doing things. Whereas a fairy tale, I mean, that's your dad or your mom or your grandpa or some adults reading that to you the first time, and then eventually you get to it. I was read Jungle Book when I was a kid, and I thought it was okay to go and pet bears, which I think would be a bad idea in the wild. But I think that's where
have you tried?
The concern is. No,
have you tried?
I tend to stay far away from wild animals. I like looking at them from a safe distance. But yes, I mean, so the learning bit, I think adaptive learning is a big thing. And I know, again, certain engineering schools are basically teaching, instead of telling me, hey, the formula to build this bridge and calculate the weight load ratio is this, which is a very dry way, and you can't really understand. There's very few people who can actually think in engineering and math terms and visualize it. Most people, it'd be easier for them to say, here's a visual tool, if you add a bridge, and then basically calculate the formula. And now that gets embedded in your brain more permanently, and said, okay, I did this, it generated this formula, so now I know if I'm going to do something similar, this is the formula, and that makes absolute sense. There's a connection between the formula and real life, and I think that's the important bit. That's where I think gaming is changing education, where you are able to visualize. I mean, imagine being able to visualize calculus. So learning would be so much easier and fun. I mean, calculus is absolutely fantastic. It does so many complex things. And solve so many complex things, but we've got such a clinical way of teaching calculus on pen and paper, which, again, like, unless you've got a very math and physics sort of imagination, it's hard for most people to grasp the stuff. And most people, to your point, Marco, earlier is that, or Sean earlier is that, are you just memorizing stuff and then sticking it there and saying, oh, maybe that's how it works? There's no real understanding of the concept.
Yeah, and I'm gonna stay dark here still, because it seems like, I don't know if everything is the right word to use here, but the majority of things we create these days are an abstraction that are visualized in a way that kind of take away how it all works. Kids today use an iPad or an iPhone or a phone, and they don't know that there's a cellular network and a SIM card and a computer inside that that lets them type and transcode or translate voice into words. It just does all that stuff for them. So to your point, Carey, to be able to visualize calculus, we no longer need to know calculus. And so the dark part of this for me is, who is learning calculus? Are we just accepting the current state of calculus? And it's maybe an ignorant point. Are we accepting math as it is, or how are we helping kids to learn how to extend what we know with math?
I think the way we learn math and some of these anything, I think fundamentally it's undergoing a shift, right? I mean, I think because we've got access to so many different methods to learn besides just a blackboard and a teacher and a book. I think the I don't think we are getting away from learning the fundamental, but I think just the way we teach the fundamental is changing. I think it's in my mind, I think it's easier for kids to learn the visual concept. And again, I'm going to use the Minecraft example where people are learning, kids, really young kids are learning, hey, the load bearing capacity of a wall. I mean, they may not know the formula to calculate it, but they inherently understand. And as they grow older, I mean, they're introduced to some decent sort of algebra in grade 6, grade 7, and they've been exposed to Minecraft. It's easier for them to sort of take the very cut and dry formula and add that to the visual stuff they've learned and say, okay, this is why it makes sense. I mean, is it the silver bullet? I don't think so, but I think it definitely enhances the overall learning experience and it gets the kids more interested. I mean, try telling a kid, show him a math book and say, this is what you're learning. See the reaction you get.
And see, this I think is where it's important, as kids are playing, to also introduce introduce tools and introduce the notion that they can go from their imagination to things that can allow them to start to shape play. That it's important not just to play, like it is important to play and to learn from play, but more kids need to be exposed to the tools and structures that shape that play. And it could be like, okay, here you're playing soccer. Now we're going to give you some exercises and stretching and some things to practice, and then you're going to get better at soccer. Or, hey, you liked reading Tolkien and Lord of the Rings. We're going to sit you down and have you try to create short stories and see if we can get you to organize your thoughts so that the words flow and you have not a simple thing where it's like, I did this. It's like, no, we're going to get you to construct a narrative. And now you're going to take somebody else through that. And so I think, regardless of what form, what medium, it becomes important, just to bring it back to that notion of creation, to show people that play is a thing that can be structured, and they're it's like, okay, you're playing soccer, now you're playing basketball, now you're playing football. These all have rules. This is how these work. Now take this and use this to go create your own game. And we're going to give you a few things, and someone goes off and makes Quidditch, or any number of other things. Like, kids can go like, okay, we're going to do a thing that's kind of like baseball, but we don't really have all the bases, and we're going to do our own thing. Being creative, understanding that you can
creative engineering.
Yeah,
That's
that
what it is.
you can build something yourself, because the other part, like when I look at my own creativity, I know that part of it comes from my parents when I was young saw that I was often creative, but they also saw that like I would absorb bits of play, stories, and would regurgitate that. And they're like, okay, here, let's give you Dungeons and Dragons. Like they weren't like, oh,
Yeah.
Dungeons and Dragons is evil. They were like, no, you like the idea of stories. We're going to give you a thing to structure stories. Go make something with this. Here's Legos. Here's a Texas Instrument, TI 99.4. Learn basic on it. Here's a Mac. Use it to create little animated videos. Giving kids especially tools, and then saying, use these to create and see what you come up with, because there's work in that creation, but there's still play, because you're being playful when you're making something. Whether you're like, I'm going to write Tolkien's lost story about Bilbo Baggins when he was 10 years old, or anything. You invest your own imagination, but you actually
Yeah.
have to structure it and you have to build it, and that
Yeah.
building is
Yeah.
really important.
Absolutely. I hate to do this because I want to keep going and we haven't touched into metaverse. So I was going to bring Ready Player One into the
Yep.
into the game here. You just mentioned, Dungeons and Dragons. I'm thinking like now that it went back on Netflix and the Stranger Things with the Hellfire Club. I think maybe a lot of kids that never even thought about playing
Yep.
that. Maybe they are experimenting. So, but unfortunately, I got to call it off because there is real life and we have another call. But I would say this is definitely episode 1 of this. So maybe we'll take it
I'd
back.
say that,
'cause
yeah.
There is a lot. There's a lot to talk about here.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're just kind of scratching the surface. And
Yes.
I think that this notion of play and learning and creation and performance and work and how those things all fit together, yeah, there's a lot of rich stuff in there. And I know exactly what you're talking about with Stranger Things and that sense
Yeah.
of like,
Right. We need to talk about that.
like, and we'll get into that in the next one, but like that notion of like misfit kids that get together and play because in some respects they're hiding because they're not allowed to fit into society, and so they find a way to go off and play to make sense of the things that they're going through. Play can be an escape. It can also be a sanctuary.
But does that mean I have to watch the whole Stranger Things completely end to end before the next episode?
I did. So,
or we'll recap it for you.
well, if you want to know about the Hellfire Club, you just go with the last season. All right, we gotta go.
The name Hellfire Club.
Oh, it's pretty great. I'm thinking I'm gonna get the T-shirt too. So, everybody, stay tuned. We hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as you can tell. We are having fun having those. So stay tuned. There is already 3 episodes with the 4 of us talking about a bunch of stuff from video games to creativity and artificial intelligence to many other things and many more. We'll talk about many more. So stay tuned. Audio Signals, ITSP Magazine. Thank you, Sean, Rafael, Carey, and I'm going to thank myself too. See ya.
Blue Lava is the first business platform for CISOs to manage their security program. Blue Lava guides security leaders to effectively measure, optimize, and communicate their security program with confidence and ease in one platform. Learn more at bluelava.net.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Audio Signals. If you learned something new and this podcast made you think, then share itspmagazine.com with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to associate your brand with our conversations, sponsor one or more of our podcast channels. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey. You can always find us at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society, and some even beyond that.